SATIB webinar on being travel ready for the US market. I know you're all a bit grumpy as I am about the US State Department's news around the level 4 categorization of South Africa. To be fair, about 80% of the countries worldwide are actually at that level 4. But I think based on the anecdotal evidence that we have heard from many of our stakeholders in tourism, that the Americans are still keen to travel and there's quite pent-up demand. That vaccine program, as we all know, is well underway. There's a lot of interest in international travel, and we have the exciting news that the United Airlines flight will be resuming at the beginning of June. So there's a little bit of hope, a little bit of green shoots, and we thought it would be time for us to have a webinar on behalf of SATIB just to unpack that a little bit more and figure out what the demand is out of the US market, what the US market is looking for, but also what we here as establishments, as local operators, as experiences could do to make sure that we are travel ready. So I don't know a hell of a lot about the US market, which is why I have an amazing panel of experts joining me today. And I have Marcelo Novaes, who's the general manager of Kurundani Africa, which is a North America DMC. Jim Holden, which I know is a familiar face for many of you, is a US-based independent safari consultant. We have Adam Riley, who is the founding member of Rock Jumper, can talk to us about all things birding, or what, are you a Twitcher, Adam? That's what you are. And then we have Stefan de Beer, who is the corporate commercial and contract attorney at Martin & de Beer Inc., who's going to give us a little bit of some insights into kind of contract stuff. Because as we know, last year, not having our contracts house in order with any of the source markets was a little bit of an issue. So you know the drill. If you've got a question, please add it at the Q&A folder at the bottom of your screen. And the chat is open, as you can all see. So we'd love to see where you're connecting from. Feel free to chat with each other. And of course, you know, if you are wanting to ask a question in the chat, I might not get to it. But very happy to have that in the Q&A folder at the bottom of that screen. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to kick off with Jim. Jim, maybe you can let us know where you are connecting from for you this morning.
Well, it's early morning for me because I'm probably as far away from you as I can get in California, Newport Beach, California. So I rather felt as though I was getting up this morning for a game drive. It was an early start for me. I haven't even had my coffee, so if I stumble, you'll know why.
Oh, goodness. Okay, well, that's me forewarned. Thank you very much for that. Are you seeing some of the green shoots that we're seeing here in South Africa, this demand out of the US market, or is it a story that we're telling ourselves that's not true?
Not at all. The green shoots are actually saplings now because this pent-up demand has been around for months. And people are just itching to go. All they need is an excuse to go. The only thing, as Colin Powell, our Treasury Secretary said, the only thing we can be certain about at the moment is uncertainty. And that nobody likes uncertainty, especially if you're going on a vacation. The vacation is supposed to be relaxing, supposed to be enjoying yourself, no worries, no cares. And so it's the climate of uncertainty. So if the public sector can just get its act together and have a consistent message, you'll find the floodgates will open.
That's a very difficult thing, though, for us to control. You know, as South Africa, it's difficult for us to control that level of certainty. Is there anything, Jim, in your view, that we could be doing as a destination, as product, to introduce some level of certainty?
Well, it is very difficult, granted. Governments are an entity unto themselves, we all know that. But if we could take a leaf out of your cousins up further north, Kenya, who've done a hell of a job through this whole COVID situation. They have a great friend in ATTA. You probably all know ATTA. You're probably all members of it, ATTA in the UK. So as soon as the UK put Kenya on the red list, they were at it with ATTA and lobbying. And they were getting personalities, well-known personalities, such as Jonathan Scott. I'm sure you all know Jonathan Scott, to join the fray. And that's about all you can do. You obviously have some very good institutions there yourselves. You know, the South African tourism is very active over here. And so use those levers, use those tools to just keep getting the message out that yes, you're open, yes, it's safe, explain why it's safe, etc., etc. So it's lobbying. That's about all you can do, and just hope that people over here see the light. If I may, Natalia, not to take up too much time, a very good example of that right now is the cruise industry here in the States. So CDC, who's the sort of master of all of this, CDC, and of course the state government is now taking its cue from the CDC in terms of its travel warnings. So the cruise industry really got into the CDC and said, enough, right? You've told us not to sail until 2022. We're not having it. And if you're going to keep doing that, we're going to reposition our ships in faraway places like UK, Europe, Asia, and to hell with you. CDC has now seen the light, and now they can start sailing from June, and they can start sailing in controlled, and everybody understands the rules and the regulations. So a big breakthrough for the cruise industry. So there's a good example of how lobbying done at the right level with the right messaging can have an impact on government ministers who are, after all, answerable to the people.
Yeah, that's a really good insight. Thanks for that, Jim. I would have thought cruising would be one of the things that comes back the last because of this, the number of people in a small space, but I know they've been very strong with their lobby. You mentioned East Africa, you mentioned Kenya. I want to just bring Marcelo into the conversation here because we had a different conversation offline, and you were talking about the demand for East Africa as opposed to South or Southern Africa. Perhaps if you wouldn't just mind repeating what you said to me about the demand that you're seeing for destinations like Kenya and why those destinations are in the spotlight for the US versus Southern Africa, if you will.
Yeah, thank you, Natalia, for inviting me for this. It's a pleasure being here. We saw actually since July last year, mainly for Tanzania, both countries, Tanzania and Kenya, but I think Tanzania did a good job in maintaining the country open. Even though they denied the COVID, they denied what was happening, then deny it, but the country was open. So that gives ability and certainty for the place to buy it. Issue with South Africa was coming back and forth in lockdown, different levels of lockdown, closing the borders, not allowing to come in, and then closing the borders again. So that I think was a bad, not a bad move because it was to prevent the COVID to spread, but still for the tourism point of view, I think for the clients to take a decision of buying a trip to Africa, I think that was quite big. And we saw Tanzania was very busy, especially during the holiday season, the peak season in December. And Zanzibar, for example, it was seriously busy, not only with Americans, but with many other markets as well. So I think that stability, that knowing the country was going to continue being open, changed the whole decision by the clients. But I think that from now we have seen the past few months, the American clients are a lot more interested in Africa and asking and quoting and confirming bookings, and not only for next year, but also for now, for July, August. So that's a good sign.
Before I move on to Adam, just a follow-up question for you, Marcelo, and that is, the type of client that you are seeing, and I know your client is a high net worth individual. Is this repeat business? So people who know Africa already and are confident in Africa, or are these newbies that have never been to Africa before?
And also honeymooners, for example. So usually honeymooners, they come for first time. One of them is their first time in Africa. Families, sometimes the grandparent came here before and want to bring hopefully. So and come with their private jets. So it makes it easier in terms of the logistics, because another big problem to book now is to get the flights. And we know that United is trying to bring the flight from 3rd of June, but still is not confirmed yet because it needs to be approved by the governments. So that's a step, always a step. So the clients in general, they book with us all the accommodations, all the logistics, and then they go try to find the flights nowadays. So it's the opposite which was before. Usually it was the contrary. People always book the flights and then, okay, I have this window that I need to travel. You do your job and find me an amazing safari experience. So now it's the opposite. We find the whole trip, and then they go try to find the flights because of the connections, the changing of schedule of the flight. So it's a bit tricky now.
That's interesting. Adam, would you like to weigh in on what Marcelo has just said?
Yeah, great. Hi, everyone, and great to be here on this webinar. So I think certainly what Marcelo and Jim have said is 100% right, particularly the issue around uncertainty. And that's really damaged travel to South Africa and obviously elsewhere in the world. So the point I wanted to make is it's really, really important as a tour operator or a hotel to have a flexible cancellation or postponement policy. We're finding that is the biggest selling point at the moment for clients signing up on trips. They want to know that if they don't come because they can't or feel the risk is too high, they're not going to lose all their money, that they can either postpone or get their money back. So that's something that needs to be considered very carefully. Okay, flexibility. Stefan, this is a good area for me to throw you into the conversation because, of course, you have seen loads of contracts, loads of T's and C's, and I know you were bemoaning, wailing over the extent to which we weren't doing those properly for all of the source markets, never mind for the US market. Are you starting to see operators, establishments being a lot more flexible about those T's and C's? What changes are you seeing on your side?
Thanks again for having me, Natalia. Yeah, well, over the course of the past 18 odd months, we have seen, even before the pandemic, actually, we saw some of the local operators start to look at their paperwork. The reality of the matter is, specifically and especially for the North American markets, although we consider them to be a rather litigious society, that in itself presents a massive opportunity to local tourism establishments. Firstly, because litigation rarely follows where everyone is on the same page. So in order to give your market a good picture of what it is that they can expect, it's easy to copy and paste some terms and conditions here and there, and mainly limit your expanding on what services you're going to offer in an invoice. But this gives us an opportunity to tell these people, to show them that not only are we open to business, but we are open to accommodate you as best we can, within reason, obviously. But that everyone is on the exact same page as to what risks that they will be exposed to, whose liability will be what, in order to essentially avoid, because apart from the legal side of things, PR issues arise more often than legal issues due to a lack of the relevant documentation. Obviously, for international tourists and travelers, it's difficult to litigate in South Africa or in any other country for that matter, if you're coming from elsewhere. So it's not necessarily such a massive legal headache per se. It will become more of a PR issue. So if you're looking at the uncertainty that this virus has brought about, especially in the tourism space, the mere fact of ensuring that whomever intends to travel with you at least have got proper paperwork in front of them that they can see. We understand and we are aware of the risks associated with COVID. We know that flights may be delayed or cancelled. We know that you may be quarantined or whatever, but at least we get to the point where we'll do our utmost from this side to make sure that we can either postpone your trip or we can at least cut back on the initial cancellation fees. Because as both Adam mentioned earlier and Jim also said with regards to the uncertainty, I mean, spending, even though for the North American market coming to Africa in general, it is seen as a cheaper destination, that in itself is not an excuse anymore to lag behind with the way in which we conduct ourselves, especially from a legal perspective. People need to see that we are serious about protecting both sides of the coin. So if we can show them that we understand the risks and we'll carry them within reason, then as far as I'm concerned, that in itself will also clear up a lot of the uncertainty and issues that especially the North American market may have. I've also just got a quick point that Jim said earlier about the lobbying. I think what we must also do as an industry must just understand that, I mean, locally we've hosted sporting events in secure bio bubbles If you manage to at least get to the point where you can offer something similar, I think we'll start looking more towards quality over quantity. And if you, as part of your service offering, some form of a buyer bubble to an extent, that may also just give you a possible competitive edge over those not exercising. What do they call it? Not ecotourism, they call it. So similar to, if we can't sell vaccinations on our side, but we can at least sell a secure environment. Let's do that then rather.
Good one. Marcelo, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I think of what Stefan just mentioned. It's everything is about clarity. So we are dealing with every booking in depth detail about the clarity of the conditions, the cancellation conditions, cancellations related to COVID travel restrictions. So we need to send both terms and conditions to the client so they are aware of both conditions. One related to the COVID restrictions and another one for normal terms and conditions, let's say. So it's important to focus on that. Go ahead, Jim.
Jim, just unmute yourself.
I've done it. I think you can hear me. Yes, no, look, I'm making progress here. I'm learning. This is IT stuff. Good stuff. Right, well said, Stefan and Marcelo. This is the elephant in the room, refunds. That dreadful word none of us like to hear. And of course, if I may, I make a couple of points to what you've said, Stefan. As you may know, in North America, we don't have that same all-embracing law that they have in the EU, where money has to be refunded if service is not delivered. But there is an expectation here all the same. And if I can put it this way, I was listening to on the radio the other day, some of us still do that, and there was a refugee from Ethiopia being interviewed over here who now assimilated into American society. And the one thing she brought up as being absolutely extraordinary to her when she got here to the United States, that she could walk into a shop, take five dresses off the rack, take them home, try them on, ponce around in them, and then take them back and get all her money back. What? Who heard of such a thing? That's the mentality we have here. Somebody buys a safari, puts down their deposit, can't go. Of course you're going to give me my money back. And it doesn't matter, Stefan, that we've said this is a non-refundable deposit. What the hell does that mean? Right? There isn't such a thing. You didn't deliver the service. So when we're particularly dealing through a travel agent who's not going to be the advocate for us, the travel agent is the advocate, quite rightly, for their client. So we're not going to get any support there. So this is the elephant in the room. And I would like to say, Stefan, that, yeah, you're right on the money there. You have to be flexible. If you're not going to be flexible, then we're all going to get into a fight. Stefan's going to make a lot of money. We're all going to lose money. So that's not a place to go. So I'll give you an example. I have clients going to Tanzania in June. Everybody else who was going in June is postponed. But this guy is a doctor, and that's the only time he can get away. And he's already postponed from 2020, and he ain't postponing again. And if he has to postpone, he wants to cancel. So let's all wake up and figure out what's at stake here. Hold on to the booking. Hold on to the booking. I mean, otherwise we're going to start all over again. So they, Tanzania were fabulous. And normally they ask for the final balance is about 60 days. I think, Marcelo, that's about right. They've pushed right back to the end of this month. The clients are supposed to arrive on the 12th of June. Fabulous. Great cooperation. Everybody understands. Client wants to go. Just make it easy for me. So I totally agree with you, Marcelo and Stefan.
Such a good point. Marcelo?
Yeah, and it's important to realize that many people that were booked last year, they moved their bookings to this year. So most of the lodges are quite busy actually. And if they are not, they are getting now with last minute inquiries. So imagine how this season is going to be next year. So we are already facing that. So we receive inquiries for August, July next year, the peak season. Everywhere in Africa for safaris, the best months to come to Botswana, to South Africa, to Tanzania, Kenya. July, August, September, those are the golden months. And those months are already super busy everywhere. So that's really important to the agents to tell their clients as well. If they want to come next year, they need to start looking at it now because of time.
Yeah. Stefan actually mentioned, it's funny, you're not a PR person, but you mentioned PR. I'm going to ask Adam, Marcelo, and Jim to weigh in on this. And for me, the PR disaster that is the level 4 and call it by its name, 501YV2 variant that was first discovered here in South Africa. I'm really curious, and some of the people who've asked the question in the Q&A, the extent to which that perception of the state of COVID in South Africa or in Southern Africa and this variant 501YV2, the extent to which that influences traveler confidence to come to Southern Africa. Are we telling ourselves a story that it's, that people are not wanting to come because of that? Adam, you've unmuted yourself.
I think it's definitely had its effect. Everyone knows it as a South African variant, etc. And people are worried about it. So it has definitely, for us, resulted in people postponing trips. What we're also finding now is that people who were booked later in the year and were vaccinated a few months ago, are saying to us, well, we actually want to have a top-up vaccination, a booster, before we travel, and we're not sure when the booster is going to be. So because of that, we want to postpone again. So there's various issues around these variants.
Marcelo?
We have the South African variant that was discovered here, and people got crazy about it, and bad marketing for us about it. But I think that I read the other day that Pfizer is now almost finishing their vaccine that will cover the South African variant as well, which will be great for everyone. But in terms of the level 4 that the CDC put us now, as you said, 80% of the world is in that list. Even Iceland, even Mexico, they're neighbors. And so I don't think that actually the Americans are really, you can correct me, Jim, if I'm wrong, but I don't think that the Americans are really taking that recommendation very seriously now, because 80% of the world is a lot. So, and they see that many countries are opening. So you can see that Italy is opening now, France is going to open now as well. So I think it's people are getting a different understanding of what's happening in the world as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Jim?
Yes, absolutely, Marcelo. I think, though, it's a broader issue because there is now a lot of confusion over these different strains. I mean, India's got one. We've almost got to the stage now that, anybody who doesn't have their own unique strain kind of feels out of it. It's, sort of bragging rights. I got my own strain. What clients over here really are concerned about is just look after me. It's just keep me safe. Don't tell me about all these different strains and this, that, and the other. And you're quite right, Marcelo. If 80% of the world, according to the State Department, do not travel, if you can convince me to come to you, great, I'm going to come. It's extraordinary to me, the number of webinars I go on from suppliers who will take you in excruciating detail through the COVID protocols they've got. I mean, it's almost like they'll take your clothes off and put you in a shower before they'll let you in the lodge. However, everybody misses the point of this. The point of it is to see if you've got COVID. And then what the hell happens if you do have COVID? Do you stick me in prison and forget about me? I'm going to rot away as though I'm in Iran. What do you do with me? Nobody could answer that question. So it's all about, just go back to the same thing. Don't go down these rabbit holes about strains and things. How are you going to keep me safe? And if an accident happens, what are you going to do with me? And I do not want to be held prisoner. I need to get back. I've got a business, or I've got a family, or I've got appointments. I've got a wedding to go to or something. So those are the biggest fears. Keep me safe and get me back in one piece.
Yeah,
How
I
you
mean,
gonna-
the exit strategy is how do I get home if I have to get home? That's such a good point, Jim. Adam, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, so with the publication of that do not travel guidance, apparently the US government also said, if you do travel to these countries we're telling you not to travel to, our capacity to help you if you run into trouble is limited. So that has also scared people off, and we've seen cancellations and postponements as a result of that. What we also found are people are looking at the vaccination progress in the countries that they're traveling to. So it's not just their own personal vaccination. They want to see that the countries they go to are getting vaccinated, and a large proportion of the population getting there. So obviously South Africa is not doing too well in that department yet.
Yeah, Jim?
I must say, though, Adam, to what you've just said, great news that you're considering, I'm not sure it's actually been approved yet, vaccinating your frontline tourist folks. I mean, that goes a long way. And you're quite right, Adam, that over here, that is the question that's most often asked is, where I'm going, have those people been vaccinated? And so that's a very powerful message if that happens.
Marcelo?
Yeah, one of the policies in Tanzania for the guides is they need to quarantine themselves 14 days prior to the client's arrival. So when the clients arrive there, the guides are guaranteed that they don't have COVID. They were quarantined for 14 days. So that gives a lot of comfort to the clients when they decide to confirm the bookings. And also what we have been working a lot, Jim for sure can guarantee that, is in terms of where they're going to do the PCR tests, how many PCR they need to take before going to everywhere. So if they are combining 3 countries, it's a lot of logistics for that. But actually the clients, they enjoy it the way we are doing it, because then we can show that we know what we are selling and we know what we are offering to them. So I think the PCR tests are very important, and they will continue even with the vaccination. We will continue to have to take the tests.
Jim?
So you may have read they are making great progress on these rapid PCR tests, not the antigen test, which is nobody wants, but the rapid PCR. So even here at LAX, you can go and get one and you get the result in whatever it is, an hour or whatever. So if that progresses, that's great. But at the moment, clients begin to feel a bit like a pincushion. By the time you've done 3 countries, heavens above, you feel you're part of the medical profession. So yes, PCR tests are great, but we now have a new term, a phrase we use for safaris: stay longer, dive deeper. So one country, to hell with these PCR things. I'm due to go to England end of this month, and I'm doing the early release, and I'll end up with no fewer than 6 PCR tests for staying 10 days. Heavens above.
Wow. One wonders why you would go, Jim. You can come here. We're much friendlier. I mean, it is actually I get a lot of questions from tour operators and DMCs about traveling in Southern Africa, because our regulations, I mean, you think we could standardize our regulations a little bit better in our own region, where you have Zimbabwe with a 48-hour requirement and you have South Africa with a 72-hour requirement. And I just think, to speak to what you guys were saying a little bit earlier about making it easy for people to travel, why do we have this disparate regulation when we should actually be aligning ourselves as a region? Particularly when you have a market that has traveled so far to get here, they are quite likely going to be wanting to do 2 destinations instead of diving deep, to your point, Jim. Are you seeing a little bit of conflict there when people are wanting to do 2 destinations and then, I'm a pincushion, so I'm not going to do any of them?
Oh, absolutely. But it's an interesting thing because people haven't traveled during this COVID lockdown, they're not quite sure of exactly what it means to subject yourself to all these PCR tests. So at the moment it's cost. And again, if I can use East Africa as an example, when they first started saying, well, things are fabulous, we got great service, we can actually do you a test in the Masai Mara, which is 2 days before you get to the airport, but they failed to add the cost. because in the early days, you had to pay for the wretched medical person to come all the way from Nairobi to the Masai Mara and have a little safari while they took your sample. But now those costs have come down. So that's a good thing, the cost of a PCR. So at the moment, they're just looking at the cost, not really the inconvenience. And again, to all of you, congratulations, because again, you're making it easy. Have it after breakfast, when you get back from the game drive or whatever, and have the medical guy. I know the cook can't do it, and the guide can't take that sample, but hopefully that'll come next.
Yeah, making it easy for people. Okay, we do have a few questions in the Q&A already. Before I get to them, just a reminder, if you do have a question, please do put those into the Q&A for me. I'm interested in the kind of profile of this traveler in a pandemic world. This is probably not a usual traveler. And I'm also really interested in, I saw a report this morning about the states going into like a roaring 20s. So this disposable income potentially that Americans will have. Do you see the traveler profile changing in a pandemic world at all? Anyone, Adam, Marcelo, or Jim, want to weigh in on that? Or are the bog standard travelers the ones we used to have coming from the States into South Africa?
Yeah, I don't see a new traveler in that regard, if I understand your question, Natalia. It's more to do at the moment with the poor hapless people who had to postpone, who want to have their safari and are now getting pretty impatient about it all. And if we can't give them their safari soon, then they will turn to cancellation. They've had enough. Enough's enough, and I'll go somewhere else. So that's what I'm seeing. In terms of the roaring 20s, we're going to have a fling, and it's the flapper generation again. We're going to rip it. That's more domestic. That's domestic. So, okay, to hell with these masks, chuck them in the bloody Pacific. Okay, we're off to Las Vegas. We're going to rip it. I see more of that trend, really, than people diverting safari. In fact, if I may, I'll go to the opposite. That what this COVID has done, which is a good aspect, change sometimes brings good things, is a much higher determination from those same clients that were coming before to place the emphasis on a meaningful safari. The world turned upside down. Everything went to hell in a handbasket. Let's look after it. Let's look after the planet. So send me somewhere responsible where I can see that they're practicing conservation, they're looking after their wildlife, they're looking after the people. I'm seeing that trend more. Explain to me more. Whereas before it was just price, get the best deal you can, do the whole of Africa, Cape to Cairo in 5 days. Great, done. No, now it's, okay, I can understand. Send me somewhere for 5 days, one lodge. So 10-day safari, 2 lodges. Before it would have been, 2 days at each one, 5 lodges.
Yeah.
Now you can explain to them, 2 lodges, and they get it. 5 days, all these different things to do. Yeah, that's what I'm seeing. That's the trend I'm seeing.
Deep dive. Before I go to Marcelo, after Marcelo, I want to just go to Adam because I'm very interested in your specific market segment, which is a very niche market segment. So I think they were deep divers to begin with, but I'll be interested to see how that's changed. Marcelo, over to you.
Yeah, no, just complementing what Jim said is pretty much, I haven't seen any changes on the profile of the clients, but it's more in terms of how they travel. Slow travel now definitely is something that is happening. They are asking for 10 days, 15 days, 3 lodges only, or 2 lodges only, 10 days in Zanzibar, for example. So I think that's a big change, and I'm very happy about it because I always hated the 2 nights here, 2 nights here, 2 nights there. You never get to really understand the area that you are, or really get to know your ranger if you stay 2 nights in a lodge. So now you can see that clients are looking for 5 days, 6 days, and bringing the whole family and sharing the whole experience. So I think that's a big thing now.
Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. What Jim and Marcelo are saying is very true. There definitely is a resurgence in interest in nature and the environment, and more immersive travel and less jumping around. Traditionally Americans have less holidays than most other nations, and therefore want to zoot around Africa or where be it to see as many places as possible in a short amount of time. And absolutely, what Marcelo and Jim have said is true. Yeah, for us, we also haven't really seen a massive change in what people are requesting, what they're interested in. And they, they obviously have lots of concerns. Those that we've raised, there's also concerns of putting communities to risk in countries that they're traveling to, whether they or the tourist service providers that are giving them the safari might be putting people at risk. That's a major concern as well. So that needs to be addressed. But yeah, for us, we offer more than 100 different countries in our birdwatching tour portfolio. So we do see bookings moving around the world. So someone might have booked a South Africa safari birding tour and they're not comfortable coming here yet, but we've sold them onto a Hawaii safari where they're comfortable going to Hawaii. Even though there you still got to have a PCR test between each island that you travel, but they feel more comfortable in Central America, places like that, than traveling as far as Africa. But we've certainly had over the past few months our highest level of bookings in 23 years we've been in business. So there is definitely a pent-up demand. We've stopped trying to predict when everything will open up and when we will be able to satisfy all this demand, and we just keep postponing tours until people are comfortable. You also don't want to be seen as an irresponsible operator by pushing people to take tours where they're not completely comfortable doing it, and in places where all the COVID protocols aren't in place, etc. So it's a fine line between trying to get your business and also being responsible in doing that.
Yeah, great point. Okay, I'm going to run through some of the questions that we've received. I think some of them are actually statements that are kind of wanting a bit of an answer, and I'm not sure the extent to which you guys will be able to respond to them, but let's give it a good go. So Terence has asked, is it the intent for South Africa to open up without the need to do PCR testing on clients that are fully vaccinated? I am finding this a major stumbling block, especially since travel to Southern Africa is multi-country. Have any of you on the call heard of anything? I certainly haven't, with regards to South Africa removing that requirement for PCR testing to fully vaccinated travelers. I would be surprised if it was removed, but perhaps our experts in the room have heard something I haven't.
I don't think South Africa is going to do it, and I don't see any other country doing it for now, because sometimes even with the vaccine, you still get test positive. So it's a trial for a while, I think. So I don't think South Africa is going to change that for now, at least not for now.
Anna has asked two questions. One, I think we have responded to, but the second one is SATSA went out with a letter yesterday just to provide some information about what the situation was on the ground. And my thanks to Anna for doing all the number crunching, where we had a look at the infection rate per million in different source markets, with South Africa's per million cases being significantly lower than the destination or the source markets that have banned South Africa. He's asking, with that kind of letter from an association, does that put the situation into perspective? Does that help operators in the US to show that the CD warning is disproportionate? Or is it something that they, as we said earlier, they just ignore the CDC warning and they travel anyway?
So if I can comment, you might have to bleep me, Natalia, but I thought another title for the State Department of the CDC were the CYA departments, and I'll leave you to figure out what CYA stands for. But they need to protect themselves, and so it's never in any politician's interest to take on any liability or exposure. So it ain't going to happen. But don't stop doing it. I mean, it's very good to do all. I would put that under the broad title of lobbying. Keep lobbying, keep punting up your what you're doing and the great things you're doing. But don't expect them to sway people like CDC. Anybody who back to Stefan could find themselves in a liability situation.
Have
You know, similarly, no, you know, having been on the other side of the desk in Africa, and seen how these appointees are made. It's normally the consul or whatever in the consulate in these different countries who makes that decision about the travel warning. He's never going to say, I had one occasion where it happened in Uganda, and the poor hapless fellow, he lifted the travel warning on Uganda, and you all may know this, it goes back in time a bit. Poor hapless fellow, about a month later, the Interahamwe struck the camp that we were using in the Bwindi forest, very sadly. That poor fellow, I think, was summarily dismissed. The only reason he changed the warning was that he had just arrived, so he wanted to make a name for himself. Very unusual. So no, don't expect CDC to be swayed by anything like that. And that's why, for example, even the UK put Kenya and East Africa, Marcelo, on the red list all that time ago, and narrowed down the air corridors. However much lobbying, they're not going to lift that. It's not worth it. It's not politicians worthwhile doing it.
Adam?
Yeah, I think with statistics, you can make up almost anything. And personally, I think looking at historical infection rates isn't really all that valid. You know, those countries with very high infection rates are now a large proportion of the population are vaccinated. Whereas the risk in a country like South Africa, where the infection rate might be lower, yet we still fully at risk of third waves, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know whether looking at past infection rates and saying we're not so bad is really looking at the risk profile.
Okay. Stefan, can I just ask you the question around liability for the operator? So let's just say that nobody cares and they're happy to travel anyway, regardless of what the CYA CDC says. From a liability perspective, for the DMCs here, or even for the tour operator in the US, if they encourage tourists to travel in spite of that CDC warning, are they not setting themselves up for all sorts of lawsuits?
That depends. That depends on the nature of the relationship that they've got with their clients. Again, I mean, it's similar to any venture. If you decided to take on certain adventure activities in Southern Africa in general, you will have an indemnity and a waiver that you'll have to sign. There's no such thing as a one size fits all when it comes to indemnities or waivers, but at least if you are made aware of what the risks are, I mean, surely if I'm an operator or if I'm an institution that provides some form of adventure tourism, then obviously there will be some adrenaline junkies who will take on exceptional risks when it comes to the itinerary. So the mere fact that someone is invited or a destination is promoted in itself is not sufficient to find liability. The fact that the CDC has put out a warning in general is a point of concern. So you've got the responsibility as an agent or as a DMC or whomever to advise your clients of why that CDC has put out the notice and why it is a risk. What does it mean that it's an increased risk? But then to at least then give the client the opportunity to make their own decision. So marketing something is not making a decision on behalf of someone. So if you market the destinations and you advise them that there is the CDC warning, there is concerns with regards to rate of vaccination, etc., then again they've got their own choice to make. But then it's the local operators and the agents' responsibility to ensure that it's not something that you tell someone over a phone call. They need to see it in writing as part of their booking. That these are the heightened risks. However, these are the measures that will be taken. However, nothing can completely take away the risk that I may have to incur, and that is as far as it can go. But the mere fact that you're trying to market something, or that you are having someone look at a destination in itself is not sufficient to find liability.
Jim.
Yeah, just from this end, it all comes back to that insurance. So here, strange as it may seem, there's only one country, to my knowledge, that the insurance won't cover you if you find yourself there, and that's North Korea. So in spite of this do not travel, it is a warning. And so in terms of travel insurance that we offer, or operators here offer through the insurance companies here, you will be covered if the border is open and you can travel. So if you take Kenya's recent lockdown, for example, which was precipitous, let's face it, it happened overnight. It wasn't the most convenient thing that happened. Clients who were en route were better advised to turn around and come home, because by the time they got there, they were incurring extra cost, which would not have been covered under their insurance, because the borders were closed, and therefore they were closed in terms of insurance interpretation due to pandemic, and pandemics are not covered. But if borders open and you find yourself there, then back to the liability issue. You signed either a waiver if you didn't take out insurance, or you do have your insurance, and so you go to your insurance company if something should happen to you.
Okay, well, there was actually a question around travel insurance. Is it true that travel insurance will not cover when traveling to a red listed country? It seems to be a huge barrier, especially for people traveling to South Africa for the first time. So if I'm hearing you, Jim, as long as the border is open, the travel insurance will respond, essentially.
Yeah, and even then, there's I don't want to get too much into the weeds here, but even then, if the border was closed and you were there, it doesn't cover you to get all your money back because of the pandemic, but you're still covered under the medical section of the insurance. So should you get COVID, should be unlucky enough to get COVID and you have to go to hospital, you will be covered. And certain insurance companies now are also making special dispensation for quarantine. So they will pay us up to a certain sum of money for you to be in whatever the government has dictated you should be in terms of the establishment. So only some insurance companies are doing that. But this will evolve. That's the other thing to remember. This will evolve. It wasn't that long ago when America was totally isolated from terrorism. Whereas in England, on your way to the office, somebody blew up the office on your way there. Well, too bad. You go home and work from home. But here in the States, this all happened quite recently. But see what's happened to travel insurance. Terrorism was not covered. It is now. So give it time, and you may find, if we're going to be living with pandemics, that insurance, Stefan, will probably have to include pandemics if they're going to remain competitive.
I'll come to you in a sec, Stefan, because I see you're unmuted, but essentially it is that delicate balancing act between the cost of medical expenses being covered and cancellation and curtailment of travel as a result of the pandemic, and making that distinction. The insurers will pay for the medical costs, but they will not pay for the cancellation and curtailment, essentially. Stefan, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, just on that point, I've have been dealing with quite a bit of claims and repudiation of travel insurance claims in general. I've seen where parties have taken up travel insurance with the same insurer with different sets of policy wordings. So even though there may be a trend towards covering, as Jim said, even though there may be a trend towards covering more events or incidents or claimable events, the reality of the matter is it all comes down to the specific contract that you've got with your insurer. In South Africa, I mean, there's been major case law recently with regards to the relationship between an insurer and the insured, and what their responsibilities and liabilities may be. So it's always it's a tough thing, but ultimately for you to make sure that you understand and know exactly what is covered. I must be honest. I mean, 3 years ago, I didn't exactly know what travel insurance even meant. I thought that if it meant that if I can't enjoy my full experience, or if I can't go the day on which I wanted to go, that I'm entitled to receive whatever funds I may have spent. But you get, more often than not, for example, when it comes to curtailment or cancellation, you only get paid what it will cost to get you back from your destination to get home. So even though you may have spent $20,000 on a massive trip or whatever, you're likely to receive maybe $1,000. But that comes down to the specific insurance cover you've got. So what we've been doing over the course of the past few months especially, is we've been advising our clients to get as close as possible to making it a requirement for full and comprehensive travel insurance, so that everyone understands what is covered in the case. Because ultimately, I mean, for South African market specifically, we've got very low margins, because there are so many smaller and bigger operators and entities in the tourism space. The margins in general are rather small. But that means that there's not really a lot of meat left to distribute when it comes to, amongst others, refunds, as Jim said earlier. So if we look at how one would go about to mitigate the risk of not being able to either refund a client or to at least get a postponement that is decent enough and viable economically, is to ensure that you tie up the entirety of your value chain. So irrespective of what type of service you offer, is to ensure that everyone within that value chain of yours that may have to have either render service or accommodation or whatever to one of your clients, that everyone is on the same page. So it's an easy thing to say, but make sure that your client understands what they're in for. Do you know, as a local tourism operator in one way or another, do you know what you will be in for? Are the lot of you on the same page when it comes to the possibility of a cancellation or a postponement? Because even though I may want to offer a postponement or a cancellation and I'm willing or able to fork out the refund, you don't know if the oak down the street who's supposed to be the one who's doing the catering for your guests, whether he'll be able to either pay your refund or see to the postponement. So ensuring that the entirety of your value chain is on the same page may be one of the best ways to mitigate that risk, especially when it comes to the US market, who feel that they are entitled to refunds as they should. I mean, that makes sense. If you don't receive the service, then surely you're entitled to receive the money. Alternatively, an opportunity to take it on another date. So that may be the best way to go about it.
Okay, Jim, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, just a quick comment, Stefan, on what you just said there. One thing to do, I mentioned the non-refundable deposit. Nobody understands that over here. And also, of course, the dreaded credit card repayment. So, you know, you can defend it as much as you like, but the credit card company will just reach into your bank and help themselves. So one of the things to think about is to reword what those payments are, Stefan, when you talk about everybody downstream or upstream, whichever way it is, being on the same page. How about a mobilization fee? So whatever the costs are to set up the safari, and let's face it, there are a lot of moving parts. Adam will know all about this. A lot of moving parts. I didn't realize you send all your Twitches all over the world, Adam. My God, you must have a hell of a headache. But all those moving parts, it's hard to get everybody on the same page. So why not make it clear? This is a one-time payment. You ain't getting the money back because it's going to be spent. You know, by the time Adam's paid his guy in Hawaii and everybody else, it's gone, setting up your safari. So if you don't come, that's gone. It's a mobilization fee. And that may help to hold on to that initial deposit. I don't know if Adam has a comment on that.
Yeah, those are absolutely valid points that Stefan and Jim have said. So we've been working really, really closely with our suppliers and ground agents around the world in the countries that we are offering tours to ensure that they are as flexible as we want to be to our clients. So you have to be aligned. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself in trouble.
Jim, what you were saying, we actually had a question a little bit earlier. They've said, for our US market, we have started calling 10% of the cost of a trip we have designed and booked for a client our consulting fee. This is the cost the client pays as he chose to call a specialist to negotiate and plan this trip for them. Much like asking an architect to design your house, if you decide not to build it, you still pay for the service. This 10% consulting fee is never refundable, even under force majeure conditions. The client is not paying more for the trip as he will still pay RAC in the end. If he chooses to cancel, we will work on getting as much back as possible. Many US agents have been working with this since last year and it is generally accepted. Jim, your feelings on this approach, would your clients understand and accept this logic?
Yeah, so the 10% is interesting because it's understood here, and if you use the airlines that we all love to hate, you know, they have their rules and you can't talk to the rule maker, which is the most frustrating experience to have. but they will normally charge you a penalty. So that's pretty understood. If you want to change your flight or cancel your flight, you're initiating it, not the flight. You'll get your money back subject to 10% handling fee, call it what you like. So adding that 10% is understood, as long as they get some money back. But I want to go further with Stefan, because we all know only too well, and Stefan named all the downstream people, the chain that's involved in mobilizing a safari. There are lots of people in that chain, and the margins are thin. So the 10% may not be 10%. It just depends what the supply has asked for in terms of, and let's start using that term, a mobilization fee, because that's what it is. You got to call all these guys, you got to make all the pieces fit. I always explain to a client, if you're booking a safari, if you're going to stay all the time in Cape Town and Joburg and Durban, it'll be half the cost of going to all the other nice places that you should be going to in the Kruger and all the other game parks. Because and I try to get clients to understand what it takes, and that's why I like that word mobilization, what it takes to get all that katundu, all that stuff to the middle of the bush. And one of the things clients come back and they just marvel at, they were sitting in the middle of bloody nowhere, and they had this gin and tonic, and it was full of ice, and the ice was tinkling, and the fridge was burbling in the back. How the hell did they do it? So mobilization fee. Jack it up, not 10%, whatever that question was. Stick it up, 20%.
Mobilization fee up. Marcelo.
Yeah, and I think that what they're mentioning about the 10% is like a service fee from the travel agent side. So we have seen that grow in the US in the past actually 4 years, 5 years. We have seen many agents starting to charge a service fee. So sometimes not even 10%, they charge, I don't know, $500, $1,000 per booking or per person. And that is a non-refundable because that's related to the service the agent is providing. So they are sharing their knowledge, they are sharing their experience, they are sharing their trust in the suppliers, the local suppliers. So they have the knowledge, and I think the clients need to pay for that. So otherwise you have a lot of work, you have many people involved in just the booking process. I'm not even mentioning the mobilization, just focus on the booking process. It's a lot of people involved in that. And if you just cancel that and get full refund of that service was gone. So why does that's not happen with a lawyer or with an architect? So it's the same, in my view, is the same kind of concept. You need to pay for a service that someone is providing to you.
Jim?
It's interesting what you just said, Marcelo, because the travel agents over here have a service fee, but it's linked to whatever the service is. So for example, if they're going to book an air ticket, it goes with a service fee, and they're miserable. They're very small. I mean, they're single-digit percentages, but they don't charge what I think you're referring to for their own services.
Exactly.
And they've been encouraged to do this ever since we got air caps. Most agents were selling air tickets and getting commissions. So I go right back to the 1990s, 1995, 96, when the air caps came in. Agents were doing that. Ever since then, agents have been encouraged, charge for your service, like a lawyer, like an architect, as you said. Very, very few will do it because the mentality is not with the clients yet. It's still the feeling that, okay, if you're going to charge me, I'll do it online.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to implement. Plus, if you've got a regular client, you don't want to suddenly say, okay, hand over $500 and I'll talk to you. So it's a tricky thing. And that's why, again, I like this mobilization fee. Stretch it as far as you like.
I love it. I'm going to steal it like an artist. Thank you for that, Jim. I'm acutely aware it's 5:02 and I'm standing in the way of perhaps a glass of wine for Adam, Marcelo, and Stefan, and a cup of coffee for Jim. But if you would just bear with me, I have 2 questions that I cheekily just want to chuck into the mix, if that's okay. Happy? Okay. Right. So the first question was from Diana, and she said, I have a honeymoon couple coming from New York City. They want to postpone their honeymoon. They are staying in 5 different places. One of these places will not do a postponement fee free of charge. They wanted to charge a 20% fee for postponement, and it is actually in their T's and C's. Has anyone else had this, and how do we negotiate with the lodge that wants to charge a postponement fee when everyone else is has leaned in and been flexible. Any views?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Marcelo.
No, we have, what happened mainly is we received many cases actually recently that the clients are postponing to 2022, and they were a postponement from 2020. So some of the lodges, they are charging a rate difference, an increase on rates, because it's 2 years ahead. So you have Forex exchanges, costs exchanges, increasing costs. So it is almost like a certain thing that the lodges are gonna do. What we have tried with some properties is to offer them, if the client's paying full now for the trip, which means that is a guarantee that the client is gonna travel next year. Can you honor 2020 rates or 2021 rates for the clients? Most of the properties are accepting doing that. Obviously, not all the clients will accept to pay in full, but it's part of the negotiation. Some other properties, we are negotiating them as a company. We negotiate and we guarantee that the clients are going to travel, and we try to keep the costs based on 2020 as well. We haven't seen any we haven't seen any supplier changing fees for next year. What we have seen is they charge for cancellation fees. That's guaranteed they will charge, but not for postponements. Jim?
Jim?
Yeah, I would say it comes down to the old supply and demand. So if a lodge is full, then it's quite understandable they're reluctant to just give all that money back. On the other hand, the counter argument to that is, well, if you're full, you presumably got a lot of demand. So why the hell, why are you charging the 20%? Just let them cancel and book another lodge, for example. Find an alternative. The other thing is time wears them down, I've found. So I've had clients who had to cancel, for example, postponed in Tanzania. They're postponed twice to what you just said, Marcelo, 2020 to 2021. Now they're gone to 2022. And it's a difficult circuit because it's Southern Circuit. These are little small lodges, etc. And it's very interesting. The small lodges, very understanding. My hat's off to them. I can't compliment them enough because I know they must be hurting like hell in their back pocket. So I can't thank them enough. And they were very, very gracious. And they said, yes, you can postpone, no penalty, and no increase for coming the year later. Fabulous. It's the larger properties. So when they have to pass through Dar es Salaam, or they got to go through a major city, Arusha or whatever, those lodges. And probably it's because they're catering to the domestic market. So they've got less incentive to cooperate. I won't name any names, but I think that's probably the reason.
Before I come to you, Stefan, that's actually a segue to the other question that I was going to ask you. And I have had this a lot from DMCs who've said that they have suppliers that insisted on payment for bookings that happened during lockdown. And American travelers had to cancel their trip in June 2020 and the suppliers refusing to refund. And now the DMC is stuck with a bill. Do you have any advice for DMCs that are in that space as a customer of that DMC?
In general, firstly, in answer to that question specifically as to how do we go about negotiating with one of 5 properties who are now insisting on charging a 20% postponement fee or cancellation fee? Again, that's why my advice, and I mean, everyone's got 2020 vision in hindsight, but that's why it's important to understand and know that everyone in your value chain is on the same page. In this specific instance, the terms of the contract are clear, unfortunately. And I mean, I'm talking straight from a legal perspective. The terms of the agreement are clear. So by the time that you entered into that agreement, those were the terms that that you are bound by, and that will remain the case. So what could possibly be another solution is to perhaps request instead of a 20% fee is to perhaps negotiate a lower fee, taking it up with your clients. I mean, and that's again when it comes to give your client clarity, just play the game in the way that you would want it played with you. You want to know that, listen, these are the terms and conditions that are applicable with these different establishments. This one specifically now is charging a 20% fee to do a postponement. Are you up for it? Are you not? Because the reality is, if we cancel, there's either a 70 or 80% fee or a full percent, 100% cancellation fee applicable, which is not something that's all that often seen, at least by us. The second question with regards to the local market, how do you go about to get to the point where now someone is either refusing a refund in full or postponement in general? The reality of the matter is, in South Africa, due to, amongst others, the Consumer Protection Act, you're not allowed to not give a refund for services not rendered. You are allowed to charge a cancellation fee. You can charge a postponement fee. You can call it whatever you want, but it must be firstly a reasonable fee, and secondly, it must be clear to the parties when they entered into the agreement. So the mere fact that someone is now refusing to make a refund in itself, if I refuse to pay you what is due to you, then I'm in the wrong, not you. So they must simply be brought to task. It is difficult, and we've seen quite a number of our clients, especially in the tourism industry now, where that has unfortunately happened quite often, where properties have suddenly decided that even though we won't be rendering the service in any way or form, we won't be refunding you at all either. And that in itself has led to quite a number of letters of demand leaving my office over the course of the past few months. But again, that's why our advice is to ensure that your value chain, that your chain at least remain on the same page, so that you can, as Jim said, make it easier for your clients to come here.
Yep, you can't choose your family, but you can choose your friends. Jim.
So I would just say to that, it comes down to relationships, particularly in our sector of the industry, is very much relationships and trust. So as hard as it is, it'll come down to that. You'll probably not want to deal with that operator again. But I would also say that there is, in terms of getting some money back, that's obviously open to negotiation, and trying to shift it, trying to move it to another client or whatever, so that they don't have to actually dig into their bank and pay you the money back. But even then, Stefan, the law over here the same. So Air Canada tried to play this game over here. Under Canadian law, they said they didn't have to get money back. Under US law, they do. They've now caved because of relationships. People have been blacklisting Air Canada. I'm not going to book on that wretched thing because I won't get my money back. You get a reputation. So it's worth, in the negotiation, drawing these issues to the attention of whoever it is you're talking to. Do you really want to ruin these relationships, Mr. X?
Mr. X. Marcelo.
Yeah, I think it's, from a good side, that's something that we can do to make things better. Actually, we've seen many clients that postponed their trips from last year to this year, and they are now actually upscaling their trips. So they are extending for 5 more days, upgrading their lodges, upgrading to a honeymoon suite, things like that. So that's a good thing to offer as well to your clients when you are coming back to them and offering the postponement, is try to make it better, because they have been 1 year without traveling as well. So they probably have more money and saved, and they want to travel. They want to stay longer. They want to enjoy more that trip as well. So it's a good thing to, there's always a good point on a crisis as well.
That's a great end off. Thank you so much for that, Marcelo. And really one of my most enjoyable webinars, and I have done so many of them. So thank you so much for joining me today. Adam, I hope you didn't have webinar fatigue. We did discuss this before we hopped on.
It's been great. Thank you, Natalia, and Marcelo, Stefan, and Jim.
Thank you, guys. You've been an absolutely amazing panel. I know everybody received so much great insight from you. I hope to have you all on a panel with me again sooner rather than later. So to Adam, to Stefan, to Marcelo, and to Jim, thank you, Jim, for foregoing your coffee and joining us this morning.
Not at all. It was a pleasure. And Natalia, thank you for corralling us, keeping us all under control, waving your stick. Well done, and thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who logged in today. It has been recorded. We will release it, and really appreciate everyone's support. Stay strong. We can get through this. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye for now. Bye.